Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Talk, Getting Started with Computer Vision. I'm your host, Ben Kotvis, Chief Architect of IoT, and joining me today are my colleagues, Amol Ajgaonkar, CTO of Intelligent Edge for Insight, and Ken Seier, Insight's National Practice Lead for Data and AI. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Ben.
In the last two episodes of the series, we've talked about the benefits of computer vision and some of the innovative ways it can be applied across industries. Today, we'll take a more technical look at how these projects are developed and implemented, both from a functional and operational perspective. Let's first talk about how most organizations get started with a computer vision project. In your experience, Ken, what does this look like?
Many companies get really excited about the potential of computer vision, and they should. But often they try to tackle a problem that's just a little too complicated and maybe not as directly implementable as they might want. We really like to see the companies that we work with focusing on those first cases that can drive real business value quickly, minimum of effort, maximum impact.
How about you, Amol?
And I think what they also miss upon sometimes is the understanding of what it would take to operationalize this, right? What does it take to get it into production and scale it out? So if you don't take that into consideration, you will never understand the total cost of that solution and then compare it to the value that it brings back to the organization. So the comparison of a solution, cost of a solution holistically, and then the value that it brings is super important, so that you understand if it's of real value, if there is ROI there or not. So I think that is where sometimes customers miss that part of understanding the costs and challenge of operationalizing it and scaling it, and they get excited about the technology itself, and they dive directly into the solution.
Sticking with you, Amol, for a minute, once they've gotten buy-in from leadership to explore whether computer vision is the best solution for a particular challenge, what's the first step in kicking off that initiative?
I think the way we approach this with our customers is talk about the end-to-end solution, right? And then when you're talking about the solution holistically, planning each phase of it, right, from selecting the right team that is required, not just from our teams, but also from the business side, right? The customer's team that needs to be involved, and how much involvement is required from their teams to make sure that we have a good product at the end. Always having the goal in mind and what are we trying to achieve, right? So on that journey, there are many opportunities to deviate because there'll be something more exciting, more information will come through. Pivoting is important, adapting is important, but making sure that the ROI, the goal that we've laid out at the beginning, we achieve that, and then having a plan for training the data, testing it, and operationalizing the model. And when I say operationalizing the model, not just that it's been in production and now we are done. What happens after that, right? How do we have a support, plan in place? Who's going to take the support calls? How are we going to maintain the edge devices? How are we going to maintain the models? Everything has to be considered holistically, have a plan together, and then move forward. And I think it just starts right from, even from like data collection, getting into the nitty gritty right here, data collection strategy, the processing, the testing, defining an ML ops strategy on how are you going to update the models, how are you going to retrain the model, how are you going to version the model. Bringing that complete, structure and defining it as an edge strategy becomes super helpful. Ken, anything from your end?
So we really like to work hand in hand with our customers to drive that entire process in an end-to-end pilot. We want to create a minimal viable product that drives that value, that has as few complications as possible, so that we can get them from ideation and help them identify that correct use case that's going to drive that value, that's going to have the right level of complexity and implementation, that's going to have the right executive support in order to get over that finish line, and take them through that entire process with the data collection, the data labeling, the model building, the model validation, the deployment, the monitoring, the automated retraining. Often customers call this the last mile. I think about 85% of projects fail trying to get into production. And the thing that I really need to impress on our customers is that's not the last mile. The last mile is when it finally comes back to driving real business value and users have accepted it. So once you have it productionalized, once you have it in your ecosystem, once you have it monitored and retrained, you also need to integrate it back into your business systems. You need to show people how to use it. You need to make it intuitive so that people don't need training. You need to get it into the business process, and then you need to observe how the business process changes. AI is extremely disruptive. AI can have huge impact. You can create all new business models for operation, and you need to capture those back. So you need to create this holistic cycle of this virtuous cycle of analytics improvement and AI improvement that iteratively drives more value into the business through artificial intelligence integration into your business and customer ecosystems.
So Amol, what are the long-term considerations for computer vision? Once you've implemented a successful proof of concept, how do you operationalize it at scale?
So I think when you're planning for the proof of concept, I think the planning for production starts then, because you need to understand, for the proof of concept, you might collect data, you might build a model, you might prove it out and be like, yep, it's all good. But there are so many parts of that process that right now you've done manually that need to be automated, right? So thinking about those automations when you deploy it at scale becomes super important. Second is you've built a model, you have it in the cloud, and you have your intelligent edge, your compute really close to the cameras themselves, right? And you are running the model there. The second part is great. Now you've collected more data, you've trained the model. How am I going to deploy and update that model that's already at the edge? It might, and you might have hundreds of locations, right? So ML ops is super important there, because unless you have that complete life cycle, that complete loop done for computer vision models or any AI models, frankly, you're going to reach, you're going to hit a plateau where you won't see additional value coming out of that model. So it becomes super important that we collect the data, we train the model, and then we have a way to actually push the model back down to the edge devices and almost do A/B kind of testing, where you say, okay, I'm going to run a few frames through my original model, see what I get, and then I run it through my newer model and see what I get. Am I getting better accuracy? Am I getting different results? And then making a decision to switch it out, right? And we do this with DevOps. We do this with using DevOps for any type of application. That's why DevOps is for application and MLOps is required, right? It's not optional. It is required for any solution, any AI solution, any computer vision solution to be deployed at scale into production. So having those two processes in place becomes super important. And then third is once you have deployed this, you have the MLOps in place, you're seeing the value. Now, interestingly, you still have to maintain that edge device that you have in on-prem and in 100 different locations. That means you have to patch it. You have to make sure it's up and running. You have to make sure that you've connectivity. All of those things have to be taken into consideration. So having a managed edge service almost where, somebody else, we can do that obviously, but, having somebody else to look at those edge devices and be and monitor those and understand what patch level they are at and understand that it's down and needs to be rebooted. Somebody by mistake switched it off, being able to turn it on remotely. All of those services become super important when you actually deploy these solutions at scale.
Ken, I saw an interesting article yesterday about a trained AI model, a very popular one, where there was an apple, where the model identified the apple, and then somebody wrote it had an apple underneath it with a little label on it that said iPad, and it incorrectly thought the next apple was an iPad because somebody wrote that on there. So when we talk about kind of operationalization and just kind of taking these things through production, obviously the accuracy, as Amol just mentioned, is really important. What are the other considerations that you have?
Sure. That was a great example of an adversarial attack. The operators had created a model that had a number of positive and negative training images. They thought they had covered all of the scenarios that would be in that environment. They trained the model, it worked very well as expected, and then someone did something unexpected. And because this computer vision and all AI are really narrow intelligences, it couldn't compensate. It couldn't think outside of the little box it was trained in, and it just failed. So what we need to do is make sure that all of these great technical capabilities of ideation and data collection and ML ops and business integration are wrapped in a living, breathing business process that can respond to dynamic changes. It needs to respond when the technology changes. It needs to respond when the data inputs change and the models go out of tune. It needs to change when the business environment changes. You need to have an interdisciplinary group of people guiding and advising your organization on how to evolve your AI strategy. AI is in its infancy. We are still learning how to implement it. We are still learning how it changes human lives. And every company is at the forefront of AI. Every market is being transformed by AI, and companies need to be prepared to respond to that. And the companies that build that first, who get to that ML ops maturity, who get to that AI maturity, who get to that process and business maturity around AI, are going to be the ones driving disruption in their market. They're going to be the ones changing the way that everyone does business, and they're going to be creating the new business models that will succeed in the next generation. And we want to help our customers get there.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you both for lending your expertise throughout this series, and thanks to everyone for watching. Don't forget we had 2 prior series, series 1 and 2. If you'd like to learn more about computer vision, be sure to check out Ken and Amol's latest article in the Tech Journal. And if you're interested in seeing how Ken, Amol, and the rest of the Insight team can help your businesses get started with computer vision, get in touch with us by requesting a discovery session below. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.